Hello, let's talk about the Renaissance. All right. Ooh, that was fancy. So here's some background on the Renaissance. It is considered to be the beginning of modern European history. This whole modern concept will come from the Renaissance. It's circa, or around, that's what the little C here means, 1300 to 1600. It kind of started in Italy, and it spreads then out through Central and Northern Europe. The Italian Renaissance is slated from about 1300 till 1527. We'll talk about that date later. The Renaissance spread to Northern Europe then around 1450. Let me get this thing out of the way here. Sorry. Okay, so la 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 la. What's next? Okay. In England, okay, the Renaissance did not begin until the 16th century, which is the 1500s, and that lasted into the very early 17th century, which is, like Shakespeare, so like around the early 1600s. The origins of the concept of a Renaissance come from this 19th century historian, so 1800s guy, Jacob Burckhardt. The 19th century is when social studies really began as a discipline. Stuff like sociology came about at that time, so it makes sense that Burckhardt would write about historiography, or studying history, in the 1800s, okay? Now, he evaluated history and said, you know what, the Renaissance is like this brand new, fresh start, and it was pretty much in total contrast to the Middle Ages. Renaissance culture applied almost exclusively to the upper class, which is important to remember. So this is a phenomenon only happening for a select group of people, okay? So it was still just like farming for the peasants. The upper class had the luxury, though, of time. They had this time, basically, so they could go to school and learn classics, and that's basically what the Renaissance is founded on. It's the return to reading classic literature and looking at classic art, classic meaning Greek and Romans. The peasantry still is going to remain illiterate. The working classes, this is interesting, okay? Now, even though the working classes and the merchant class are strengthening and getting larger, they didn't study this as much because they're just kind of preoccupied with staying in the middle class, although they were affected by the Renaissance, though we'll read about a reading revolution that takes place. Okay, so this is all possible because of the Italian city-states. Italy, as a chunk, sort of Italy area, okay, Italy is not a country, but it's a whole bunch of city-states, and they successfully broke away from this sort of feudalism kind of pattern, okay? By 1300, these despots, or signori, they overthrew all these kind of traditional feudal lords, okay, through lots of wars and stuff, and they set up oligarchies, which is small merchant aristocracies. So the people who are ruling were not titled, they weren't like knighted, or they weren't like sir and lady so-and-so, okay, they were people who became powerful through banking and through trade, okay, so they got all this money and they kind of ran their city-states. The commenda, which is a contract between a merchant and a merchant adventurer, how that worked is they agreed to take goods to distant locations and come back with the proceeds for a third of the profits. So they were able to get rich partially through this type of contract. So this is important. Italy became more urban as a result, okay? So everything is based on money and trade, and, the middle class is growing, so it had more towns and cities with huge populations, and it was the only really urban center of Europe at the time. Okay, there's a few scattered, like Paris is pretty urban at this point, but that's just like one place in all of France. So Italy and all these different city-states that you see here, I don't know why that popped up, sorry, all these kingdoms have many urban centers. So these are the Italian city-states in the late 15th century, so middle of the or later 1400s. Okay, all these little stars, big cities. Okay, moving on. So, what were the politics like? Well, there was a lot of competition between these city-states, and that's why, if you're going back here, Italy is not going to unite as a country until the 1870s, okay, because there's a lot of commercial competition, okay? Skipping ahead. Okay, so in effect, the early balance of power emerged because if one gets so powerful, the other ones might gang up against them to keep their power down because they want to kind of stay in the game. They want some of that wealth too. So because you've got this political disunity, so people there's not unity, there's no central power, it's decentralized, there is disunity, and that will eventually lead to the downfall, okay, in the early 16th century. But we'll talk about that when we get there, but that's just a little preview. So then you got these guys, the condottieri, okay, the mercenary generals of private armies who are hired by city-states for military purposes. That's going to be an important word. So basically, these wealthy merchant rulers were like, hey, condottieri, you need to defend us against, let's say we're in Florence. Let's jump back to that map over there. Let's say where did Florence go? Here's Florence. This is kind of where it all starts. We need you to defend us from Genoa, because look, they just have a tiny bit of land, and they might want to take their armies and come in and get some of our land, and we can't have that happening, because then we'll lose access to trade ports and wealth. So condottieri, you guys are going to help us out. All right. This is... I guess this must be some sort of an engraving, okay, of the, you can see I'm stealing this all from Wikipedia, that Leonardo da Vinci created, and it's called condottieri, and this is perhaps what one of them looked like. They have fancy little helmets. They're mercenaries, so they're paid. This guy's got a lion diving out of his chest. He's like, roar, don't mess with me. It's pretty cool. So this is from circa, or around, like circle, like around, get it? 1476. All right, let's move along. I'm just going to throw all this up here for you. So, major city-states and figures. The Republic of Florence, which included Genoa, was basically the beginning and the center of the Renaissance from the 14th and 15th century. So that's 13 and 1400s. It was dominated by the Medici family. The Medicis are going to be names that you're going to hear a whole awful lot for a while. This is a painting of Cosimo De Medici, and these are his dates. He was allied with other powerful families in Florence and became basically like the unofficial ruler of the Republic. So the Medicis were like the Kennedys. Like, they were like a big deal. They were big, or the Bushes. They're a big ruling family. They're going to get themselves all mixed up with they're going to be popes that are Medicis. They're sort of the strings behind Italy at this point. This is Lorenzo the Magnificent, and he is perhaps the greatest patron of the arts. Okay, so where does the Renaissance, right? Look, I got paintings over there. Why are we talking about politics? Well, these guys got really politically powerful, right? And then these really politically powerful and wealthy people are like, hey, we want pretty pictures of ourselves because we want to like immortalize ourselves because we're like that. We're rich. We want this. So Lorenzo was a patron. A patron is a person, you want this in your notes, who pays other people to create art. How did artists survive? Because of patrons, okay? These are portraits, and this is a terracotta. This is called a bust, okay? A bust is when you've got like the person's chest and head. This is a bust made out of terracotta. It's good times. Okay, so there are also, you've got city-states, and you have things called duchies, okay? And there's the Duchy of Milan. It was ruled by the I can't even say, the Sforza family, okay, after 1450. Milan is a major enemy of Florence and Venice, okay? So, again, we've got some competition. But there was this beautiful thing called the Peace of Lodi in 1454, and it created a 40-year period of basic peace. So they didn't like each other. They're competing commercially, but hey, guys, let's all get along so we don't have to waste money on war. This is an example of diplomacy. Do I get to write on here? Okay, I'm going to try and do this. Okay, this is diplomacy. This is terrible. I need to get better at writing with the mouse. Okay, so diplomacy is when you resolve something without using war. Again, war is expensive. These guys want to stay wealthy. They don't want to waste a bunch of money on war, so they have the Peace of Lodi. Okay, now you also have further south, Rome and the Papal States. The Pope served as the religious and political leaders, and they controlled much of central Italy. We're going to talk about in class why that might have led partially to the downfall of the Catholic Church next century. But don't worry, they come back. Okay, so then we've got Venice, okay, and then they have the Venetian Republic is what it's called, and it is the longest lasting of the Italian city-states. It's also the greatest maritime power in Italy, meaning that they have a really good navy. Cool. We're learning lots of beautiful vocabulary, aren't we? Okay, Naples. Holy cow. Here's Naples. Where's number 5? Here's Naples, right over here. Okay. There's Naples, and then the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. Isn't that a beautiful name? Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. Okay, it included southern Italian region of Naples and the island here of Sicily. Okay, so only Italian city-state it was the only Italian city-state to actually have a king. Okay, so there's a king of Naples. It was actually controlled by France for much of this period of time, all the way through the 15th century. But then, because of wars that we'll talk about a little bit later in class, Spain gets control of it in 1435. Moving right along. Well, what happened to the Italian city-states? It sounds like a pretty, whoa, there it goes. Whoa, that was messed up. Okay, what happened? Sounds like a pretty good deal, right? Well, we've got the French invasion of Italy that began in 1494. Milan's despot, Ludovico, quote-unquote, the Moor, meaning he was from originally Morocco, invited You read that right. Invited French King Charles VIII. Okay, those are his ruling dates. He wasn't just 13 or whatever. To invade. Oh God, I suck at math. I'm sorry. To invade Naples. Okay, Milan's traditional enemy. So Milan was like, hey, you guys should totally invade Naples. That would be awesome. Okay, so much for the Peace of Lodi. And this is the beginning. It's kind of opened up Italy to foreign invasion. Now, Florence tried to appease France. It led to the overthrow of the Medici family. But don't worry, they're not going away. All right, so this guy, I can't say his name. He became the unofficial ruler of Florence, and he was like a puppet government of the French. He pledged to rid Florence of its decadence and corruption. This says moral decay. He instituted a theocracy, which means a government based on religion, and he predicted French invasions and paganism and moral decay of other states. He's like, dude, our state is going to be so good that everything else is going to go all bad. Okay, I don't know why this is happening. I can't fix that. When France was removed, what does that say? Quick. Oh, from power, got it, in 1498, he was burned at the stake. Sad day for Girolamo Savonarola. Okay, I'm terrible. I shouldn't be allowed to pronounce names. Okay. Italy became a battleground in a series of struggles between Spain and France. So there were Spanish fears of a French-Italian alliance, okay, because the Spanish and the French are traditional enemies, okay? If Spain is doing something, the French are going to oppose it and vice versa. So there's like this alliance, and it led to this other alliance with Venice and the Papal States and the Holy Roman Empire. Huh? What's the Holy Roman Empire? The Holy Roman Empire and the Spanish have the same ruling family, and they are the, oh God, I have to write again with this thing, the Habsburgs. It's with a B, Bergs. The Habsburgs rule basically all of Central Europe and Spain in something called the Holy Roman Empire. The Habsburgs are very, very powerful people. Niccolo Machiavelli, we're going to get to know him really well. He's going to rear his beautiful or ugly head, depending on what you think of him, many, many, many times in this class, including today. In fact, we could talk about how what Obama is doing in Syria is actually quite Machiavellian, and not necessarily in a bad way. I don't know why these dates are getting covered up. I'll fix that for next presentation. Sorry. Anyway, I think they're all in your notes. Now, Machiavelli wanted to work for these people, and actually the Borgia family. He wanted to work for these people. He basically wrote a resume, okay? He's like, hey, you should give me a job, Italian ruler guy. And he called it The Prince. And it is the quintessential political treatise of the 16th century, and it is not going away. It basically says you should lie, cheat, steal, or kill to keep your country strong. It is better to be feared than loved. Wait, take one more look at that. Look, is he an angel? Is he like a political genius, or is he a devil? Bwahaha. I'll let you decide. Okay, so the Borgia family, the guys that Machiavelli was applying for a job with, had ambitions of uniting Italy. They're a big competitor, the Borgia family, of the Medici family. They do some pretty sketchy things. They stated that politically the ends justify the means. This is a quote from Machiavelli. Please know that name very well. Machiavelli, Machiavelli, Machiavelli. For rulers, it is be better, I just said this already, to be feared than loved. Rulers have to be the lion and the fox. You have to be aggressive, roar, lion, just like the lion diving out of the guy's chest earlier, and like cunning like the fox, like sneaky, cunning. I'm going to put it in sheep's clothing kind of fox. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. Okay, so the French continued to influence European rulers for centuries, and still today, those ideas are very prominent in our society. So, 1527, there was the sack of Rome led by armies of Charles V, a Habsburg. He is the Holy Roman Emperor. Okay, if any of you guys ever start a roller skating team, you have to name yourselves the Holy Roller Empire, because it would just be awesome. So Charles V, who is also the King of Spain, okay, Holy Roman Emperor, Spain and Central Europe, marked the end of Italy's cultural dominance. So that is why those dates, like I said earlier, we're going to talk about 1527. That's why we say the Italian Renaissance ends in 1527. Here's a pretty picture of Rome being sacked by these guys, the Holy Roman Army, I guess you would call them. Well, hey, let's talk about humanism. So what's this big deal? Dude, this Burckhardt guy's like, oh my God, the Renaissance is like this super huge deal. What is he on about? Well, humanism is what he's on about. The characteristics of humanism. It is a revival of ideas from ancient Rome and Greece in philosophy, literature, and art. okay. It sought to reconcile pagan literature, because remember, in Greece and Rome, there's no Catholic Church, right? Okay, this is all pagan, worshiping nature stuff. It reconciled pagan literature with Christian thought. So they're like, these guys were onto something. Let's make it Christian. Let's make it like kosher. No pun intended. Okay, so individualism is a huge characteristic of humanism. All right, it is seeking excellence in one's pursuits, or in Latin, virtue, excellence in one's pursuits. So it's not just celebrating, dude, when I die, I'm going to go to heaven. It's how can I be excellent in my earthly pursuits? That's a huge deal. Please write that down. It is the study of ancient languages, and like Latin is going to be huge, as will be Greek, okay? The Byzantium Empire, or the Eastern Roman Empire, we'll talk about this more in class, fell to the Ottoman Empire, the Turks, in 1453. When that happened, we traded with the Ottoman, we being Western Europe, traded with the Ottoman Empire and got access to all these ancient Greek texts like Plato and Aristotle. And so they got translated, and then they made their way into Western European culture as well. By 1500, all rediscovered because we started to trade with the Ottoman Turks, rediscovered Greek and Roman texts were translated, like I just said, and printed. So I'm going to put all this up on the page here. Okay, so it largely rejected Aristotelian views and medieval scholasticism in favor of all this stuff. So Aristotelian means, is a word used to describe Aristotle, and we'll talk a bit about him in class. Aristotelian views and medieval scholasticism, which was sort of the big educationism of the time, system of thought, they replaced him with Cicero, Livy, Virgil, and Quintilian. What an awesome name. Greek writers such as Plato, early Christian writers, especially those of the New Testament, and it was all predominantly, this was happening in Northern Europe, okay? Because 1453, that's like less than 100 years before Italy gets sacked by the Holy Roman Empire, and these ideas don't have time to materialize in Italy like they do in Northern Europe, okay? So cause and effect there, okay? Liberal arts education program. Everybody studied grammar, rhetoric, the style of argument, poetry, history, politics, and moral philosophy. Kind of reminds you maybe a little bit of our curriculum, right? Okay, this is a huge impact on American education today. There's also something called civic humanism, okay? And that means education should prepare leaders who will be active in civic affairs, just like I want your education in this class to prepare you to be civically responsible for moving our communities and our nation forward, okay? There were prominent humanistic political leaders such as Salutati and Bruni. Often humanism was more secular and lay-dominated, meaning outside of the church. We're seeing a trend here, outside of the church. Most humanists remain deeply Christian, however, in both Italy and Northern Europe. Now let's talk about my friend and yours, Petrarch. I love Petrarch. He is called the father of humanism. He is considered to be the first modern writer. And you know those guys that walk around and they're wearing like Led Zeppelin shirts and they're like, man, I should have been born in the 70s. Petrarch was like the original that guy. He was like, man, I should have been born in ancient Greece. I'm not in my time. I don't want to be in the dark ages here. So he used to actually write letters to Cicero. Cicero is dead. He was like, hundreds of years dead. And so he would write him pretend letters and be like, dear Cicero, man, I wish I were alive in your time. Here are some ideas I have, and you are just so amazing. He like wrote him fan mail, and this is all published. He wrote his most well-known poetry in the Italian vernacular, so people could actually read it. Oh my God, he's so beautiful. He used to write these unrequited love poems about this woman named Laura, and he'd be like, Laura, baby, I know we're never going to be together, but oh, I love you, I love you, I love you. But it's like actually better poetry than I just said. Okay. Then you got this guy Boccaccio. He basically wrote an encyclopedia of Greek and Roman mythology. His most famous work, which we're going to read some of if I quit scooching ahead on you, is the Decameron, and it's 100 tales that provide social commentary on 14th century Italy, and his goal for writing was to impart wisdom of human character and behavior. So there again, we see this focus on human beings, not so much a focus on the church. We're going to call this secular. We'll talk about that in class. Secular is when you focus on something that's not the church. So Leonardo Bruni was the first to use the term humanism, and he was among the most important civic humanists and wrote perhaps our first modern history. So nerds like me read him. Lorenzo Valla, oh, he's cool. He was an expert on the Latin language. Look at all this cool stuff that he wrote. Okay, so here's a oops, Lorenzo Valla. Oops, I kind of realized that this supposed document, the donation of Constantine, which kind of gave the church like tons and tons of power, was a fraud. Actually, somebody in the church wrote that and made it up. hundreds of years after Constantine died. Awkward. Okay, that's going to be an important one for discrediting the church. He also exposed the errors in the Latin Vulgate, the official Catholic Bible. He's like, yeah, you interpreted that incorrectly. That word doesn't mean that. So that was a big blow to Catholicism, Mr. Lorenzo Valla's scholarship there. Okay, Marsilio I'm going to say that wrong. Ficino set up the Platonic Academy, which, as you can guess, is an academy, an area of study based on the works of Plato. It was one of the most important, influential humanists of the 15th century. He founded this academy, paid for by my friend and yours, Cosimo De Medici. It resulted in the spread of Plato's works throughout much of Europe, and it was translated to other Europeans' languages in their vernacular for the first time ever in history. Then you've got this guy, Mirandola. Okay, so he was a member of this academy. He wrote something called the Oration on the Dignity of Man. It's very important work, and he's saying that God, people are created by God and given tremendous potential for greatness, and that we have free will. We have free will to choose to achieve greatness or to sit on the couch and play Xbox. Just kidding. Or to not achieve greatness. Okay, here we're back to Machiavelli. We're going to read some of him in class. We talked about him. We're going to move on. Baldassare Castiglione, wrote the Book of the Courtier, which basically defined what is a Renaissance man. How should you act as this glorified individual created by God to achieve virtue, to achieve excellence? How should you behave? Well, he basically says you must be a true gentleman. You must open the door for the ladies. You must be well versed in all of your liberal arts studies, as well as mathematics, architecture, etc., etc. You basically have to be an expert on everything, be a very well-rounded person, and he coins the idea of the Renaissance man. We're going to watch a fun video in class, I promise. Hold me to that. About the Renaissance man. Okay, Johann Gutenberg. We're almost done. You guys have been awesome. Just hang with me. This is not a 50-minute lecture. So, Johann Gutenberg. All right, he lives around circa 1395 to 1468, and he brings us perhaps the most important invention of that entire time period, the printing press. Holy cow. Did you know that people used to have to, they had monks, like tons of monks, not monkeys, but monks sitting around in monasteries just copying by hand all of these ancient texts, and just like, oh my God, I can't, the blood just drained probably from every other part of their body just to go to their brain and their hand to do this. How insane. Oh my gosh, you guys worry about computers booting up, right? Oh man, my iPad won't load. These guys had to write all this stuff by hand until Gutenberg, using technology from the Chinese, using printing blocks, actually created a machine that would do movable type. And the very first thing he created in 1455 was the Gutenberg Bible. It was the very first book ever published on a printing press, was of course the Bible. Now, like I said, you don't have to copy it by hand anymore. This is one of 48 complete Gutenberg Bibles still in existence over at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., where I spent my honeymoon. It was published in in Mainz, Germany. So thank you, Germany. In Mainz, Germany, which I think, if I'm getting my mental map correctly, is in northwestern Germany. Maybe I'm wrong. He cranks out these Bibles, and people are like, whoa, that's so awesome. Oh, oops, it kind of facilitated the spread of the Reformation, because now people are like, dude, I can go get my own Bible and read it and interpret it for myself. What do I need a priest for? Okay, so this is actually inadvertently, it was an unintentional cause of the spread of the Reformation. So here is how the diffusion of movable type printing press occurred. So it starts here. I was kind of right. So here's Mainz. Okay, and then 10 years later, all these other cities over here. Okay, we got one in France over here. So here's Mainz again. Wait, where did Mainz go? This is Mainz. So then boom, 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 boom. Okay, and then another 10 years later, holy cow, it's like the chicken pox. In just 50 years, okay, there's printing presses everywhere. It's craziness. Now, we're not going to talk about Renaissance art, so I'm going to pause with that today. What I'd like you to write down in your notes is make sure that you've summarized all the major sections, all those subtitles. Make sure you understand all the bold print words, and please come to class prepared tomorrow with some kind of a clincher statement for the political causes and beginning of the Renaissance. Have a wonderful day.